So, in this video I am going to talk about the Marechussee Hunters, and I also mention their connection to Clorinde. I decided to make this video after I saw the version 4.7 special program, and from what I've seen, many people don't really know who the Marechussee Hunters are. But before I start talking about that, there is a quick disclaimer. This is just a theory, I unfortunately can't read the developers' minds, so I just have to theorize and let them cook. All I say in this video is simply my opinion, so if you disagree with anything I say, please tell me why in the comments down below. I'm also sorry for mispronouncing some of these names and terms. I feel that if I tried to do, for example, the French accent, it would just sound insulting, so please forgive me for that. The thing that probably most people know about the Marechussee Hunters is that it's in the name of an artifact set that you can farm in Fontaine. So I'll first summarize the Marechussee Hunter artifact set, and I'll fill in all the missing or additional information that we got, for example, from the new world quest in Remuria or other lore bits and pieces. First, I'd like to mention one interesting thing, and that's the Marechaussee, which was a French police force that was formed way back during the Middle Ages and lasted until the French Revolution. But now, let's get into the actual lore. As we know from the new world quest in Remuria, Cassiodor was a Harmost, way back in the ancient times of Remuria, who served under the god king Remus. Thanks to his friend Boethius, he received a high position as a Harmost, which is something like a governor. Despite his high position and the trust Remus placed in him, he noticed that the Phobos, aka Remus's Grand Symphony, started acting weird, and Remurians were destroying the so-called barbarian tribes of Fontaine under its influence. He talked to Remus about this, and when Remus learned the truth, knowing the fall of Remuria was near, Remus freed Cassiodor from his Grand Symphony and decided to entrust him with the duty of guarding Remuria after its fall. The artifact set describes how Cassiodor, who as I said plays a very important role in the world quest, was revered as the Golden Hunter. It talks about the times after the fall of Remuria already happened. The motto and the purpose was to pursue the phantoms in the dark, expel them all, and hunt them down, which is said to be his quote. This is the origin of the name Marechussee Hunter. He was the one who founded the Marechussee Hunters, aka Marechussee Phantom, together with a few other Remurian survivors. Their goal back then, as I already indicated, was to defeat monsters using unique hunting methods. Eventually, most of them reintegrated back into Fontaine society, and they ceased being hunters. Today it's an organization that's more focused on investigating criminal activity than actual battle, and its members are mostly Melusines. Which is pretty funny, by the way, because it's hard to imagine the supposed elite force of Melusines in an actual fight. I can only picture it as that one funny shot from Furina's character demo, where they are hunting a child in the streets. But all jokes aside, they were chosen mostly due to the fact that they have powerful eyesight, with which they can see things that normal humans aren't able to. And also due to the fact that Nouveled really likes them, so he assigned them this role when they first arrived in Fontaine. The organization as a whole works under Nouveled, and Clorinde is a successor to the Marechussee Hunters of the past. The Marechussee Hunters once took part in the siege of Passon, which was a disaster that occurred in Passon a bit over 500 years ago, before the Canrian Cataclysm. One of the hunters, Emmanuel Guillotine, whose name you probably recognize, was in charge of this siege. Emmanuel Guillotine was the father of Alain Guillotine and Marianne Guillotine, who you probably know from the Narsenkreuz Ordo World Quest series. We also know that someone called the Great Magician Parsifal, alongside many others, participated in this battle. They fought against Eduardo Baker, who was at that time an outlaw that occupied Passon with some of his henchmen. The siege was a bloodbath, and a lot of inhabitants of Passon burned to death here, but it was eventually successful and they defeated Eduardo. Emmanuel Guillotine was very disappointed with the outcome of this event, so he left the Marechussee Hunters. After that, Eduardo's son, Jacob Baker, who you probably know as Jacob Ingold, together with René de Petrichor, who later became known as Narsenkreuz, were sent to the Narsenkreuz Institute, where they later met Alain and others, which is by the way the beginning of the whole Narsenkreuz Ordo story, but I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Basil Elton, who was the admiral of Fontaine's navy and later became the vice director of the Narsenkreuz Institute, may have been involved in this as well, but we don't know for sure. During Canria's Cataclysm, the director and the vice director of the Narsenkreuz Institute went, let's say, missing, and the institute had to disband. Some of its members, such as Elaine and his sister, were then recruited by the Marechussee Hunters and the surveillance patrol of Fontaine. During this time, Elaine created a thinking machine that looks something like a mechanical dog, which was later named Seymour, that we can also meet in the Narsenkreuz World Quest series. This machine was supposed to protect his sister Mary Ann and assist her with her work with the Marechussee Hunters. Other members of the institute decided to form the Narsenkreuz Ordo under René de Petrichor. Thanks to its actions, they caught the eye of the court of Fontaine, and the Marechussee Hunters were tasked to investigate them. They were pretty suspicious of the Ordo, so the Ordo let them take charge of security during the construction of the Tower of Ipsissimus, not to raise their suspicions. Eventually this all culminated and finally ended in a very fierce battle at Elenas, with heavy casualties on both sides, but the Hunters were said to have won the battle in the end. Though now we know that wasn't exactly the case, and even René de Petrichor survived and continued his grand plan. And this brings us back to the present day, where, as I already stated, the situation has calmed down a lot, and the organization has now changed as well. Nowadays we know that Clorinde is the successor to the original Huntress, and that she is trained in the art of the Marechussee Hunters marksmanship. Nouvelet says in his voice lines that she has peerless skills and that she is the most powerful champion duelist. According to him, she plays a vital role in ensuring fairness of the courtroom as a successor to the Marechussee Hunters. Even Clorinde's in-game titles of Candlebearer, Shadowhunter, Vanquisher of Phantoms, and Vigil of the Long Night are a clear reference to the Marechussee Hunters, and that's apparently the case for her elemental burst called Last Lightfall as well. In the Genshin Impact 4.7 livestream, they mentioned the Marechussee Hunters quite a bit in connection to Clorinde's new story quest. They said that to the modern-day Fontainians, they are nothing more than an old legend from novels and plays, and they also said that we will learn more about them in the new story quest. From the trailer, it seems like it will revolve around Clorinde's master, which I don't think we've heard of her master in the game yet, so it's hard to say if that master was also a Marechussee Hunter or not. But in the trailer we can see some scenes that look like we are in Remuria, that could be from her story quest, and in the trailer she also says,
"The way he's holding his sword, he must be a real Marechussee Hunter."
Which means that we will probably meet another hunter during the quest, but we have to wait for the actual quest to be released. Other than that, there's not much information we know about them, only some minor bits and pieces, like the fact that they had some role in the Fontaine Archon quest, for example when they dispatched people to maintain order when Furina was being blamed for the prophecy of Fontaine in the courtroom, and they even dispatched some people to search for her when she ran away. The last thing I wanted to mention was this interesting side character called Great Magician Parsifal, or Parsifal the Great, who I mentioned when I talked about the Siege of Poisson, and who seems to be somehow important even though we don't know much about her. I want to quickly clarify that this isn't the same Parsifal we heard of in Mondstadt, but it's just a nickname inspired by that tale. I wanted to mention her mainly because the Marechussee Hunter artifact set is one of the only 3 sources we have that mentions her, including 2 weapons from Fontaine, and she's closely connected to the Hunters. So Parsifal was simply an alias of a Fontainian woman who lived in the times before Canrian Cataclysm and was acquainted with some pretty important people of that time, like previously mentioned Eduardo Baker and Karl Ingold. Apparently she became a renowned magician, and her sister named Josephine was her assistant. Then after the events of the Purge of Full Thunder, Parsifal joined Eduardo in his takeover of Poisson. During the Siege of Poisson, she saved the life of Karl Ingold and later presumably died in a duel against a champion duelist. But that's it for this short video. I hope someone will find this topic interesting, even though most of this information is pretty old, and at this point I'm sure many people already know all this. So I hope you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.